We are going to get started. I believe I'm on time, so I would like to welcome you all to the Monster Panel. I am Baba, the African King. My first time cosplaying my character, and it's from my movie, The Death Pledge. I'm going to see if I can even show you all the trailer if we have enough time. The most important thing is, you know what? Let me see. We still get time. Let me see if I can cut this out and find my little trailer. Let me do that. That's nice. My name is Jeff Carroll. I'm a science fiction writer. My panelists include, and they will get close to their mics, will introduce themselves. The Monster Panel is a sci-fi party. We talk about everything in it, not just our books. We don't talk about the writing of the books. We talk about the stories out there from a literary perspective and the impact that they have. So we're here because somebody wrote this beautiful story that had such an impact on us, this billion-dollar film success, Black Panther. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then I'm going to show you the trailer to Baba, the African King in Death Pledge. Okay? Jessica, ladies first.
Okay. My name is Jessica Cage. I am a urban fantasy dystopian writer from here in Chicago. I write characters of color in fantasy. That's my tag. Grew up reading fantasy, sci-fi, all the greatest fiction, but I didn't see myself represented in that. So when I grew up, I decided that that's what I was going to do. I was going to give those little girls like me and boys of color characters that they could look up to and that represented them in the fantasy world.
All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right. Greetings. My name is Dwayne Bryant, president and founder of InterVision International. My company has directly mentored over 17,000 youth here in the city of Chicago. We've engaged over 10,000 parents and probably about 2,500 teachers. I will probably say I'm the baby to the whole Afrofuturist movement. What happened is we took probably about 250 students to see the Black Panther movie. And literally it was amazing just to see their level of attention, their level of excitement. The girls, once they saw Shuri, they saw someone who they can identify with, and I began to literally develop curriculum after that to be able to show them parts of Africa, because I've been to Kenya, Ghana a few times, Nigeria, Egypt, Morocco. So being able to tie the whole story in, and how Ryan Coogler literally did his research, is so much that went into this movie. Even I forget the name of the stuff that the Black Panther had to drink, well, that goes all the way back to Egypt with the Blue Lotus. So there was so much fact in this movie that we just look at it as entertainment. So when I saw the level of detail, I was like, well, hell, I'm an Afrofuturist and didn't even know it. So I'm the newest member. Welcome.
All right. And our third panelist, actually, I'm a panelist too. I'm a moderator / panelist. That's because I have a big mouth. And our third panelist, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Andre Betts. I'm the creator of urban style comics, Dreadlocks, as well as Black Watch and Jihad AD. I'm coming in at the last minute. I was running a little late, but needless to say, I'm here. I'm more than happy to be here in Chicago. I've been doing comics since 1996. Been doing different writings since the early 80s. I do fine arts as well. As far as the Black Panther movie is concerned and Wakanda is concerned, I'm with the panelists to my right. You know, we're all Afrofuturists without even knowing that we were Afrofuturists. I have stories that are, you know, post-apocalyptic, you know, for the future, such as the year 2166, and go all the way into the year of 31,000, whatever, because I have time traveler groups. Needless to say, I'm here to speak and talk about stories as it relates to Afrofuturists and Afro-retro, whatever name, whatever title we choose to use.
All right. And as I said, this is Baba, the African King, and the trailer is only a minute, so let's see if I can make this happen. That's the low volume version. Please excuse that. I just figured we were here a little early, so I wanted to give a little something to you all. But the story is they find an African burial ground in South Florida after Hurricane Irma. And there are good slaves buried there and bad slaves. And Baba was falsely accused of rape and imprisoned there. So he is disrupted by a group of fraternity sororities on a pledge night where they have to excavate the cemetery. And they disrupt his gravesite, and he comes and goes Jason and Freddie and Leatherface on everybody. And I wrote it because I wanted to kind of give us somebody else to cosplay besides Candyman. Because if you go to these conventions, Candyman ain't nothing but an overall, a raincoat, and that's it. So I wanted to give us something a little bit more scary than just a black man in a business jacket, right? An old black man in a business jacket. So anyway, this panel, the Master Panel, welcome to everybody that's here. We're going to get in and start discussing things. So welcome everybody, and welcome to Wakandacon. My first question for the panelists is, Stephen Barnes is a major influence in my life as a sci-fi writer. He started writing in the early 80s, 83. He published a book called Street Lethal, which married martial arts and Afrofuturism. And he defines sci-fi as a way for us to answer the big three questions. What if only, and if this goes on. We also have a broad scope of what sci-fi subgenres are. Speculative fiction is one way to define them, but we also have science fiction and fantasy, right? The big sci-fi award, the Hugo, is a fantasy award. So that's the big sci-fi award. But under that, we have dystopian, you have steampunk, you have alternative history, cyberpunk, military, space opera, post-apocalypse, all of those things, robots, anything like that. Anybody on the panel care to give their definition of what sci-fi is or what sci-fi means to you?
I guess, yeah, I can answer that. Sci-fi can be subjective, because sci-fi can mean anything to anyone. Me, like I said, I have a comic called Jihadi D2166, years 2166, when he's cryogenically frozen and he wakes up during this time frame. And we're dealing with stories such as artificial intelligence, alien invasions, and so on and so forth, where the world is completely destroyed. Also, we're dealing with time traveler, from the future. That's sci-fi to me. Because I look at a lot of movies such as Resident Evil. That's sci-fi for me. Lost in Space.
Yes.
Those are sci-fi for me. I don't get really caught off into Star Wars as much, but Star Trek, I love Star Trek. That's, I grew up on Star Trek.
All right.
I love it.
Live long and prosper. Jessica, what do you write fantasy? And we talked about it when I first met you yesterday, about how does that impact science fiction? Do you call yourself a sci-fi writer?
Some of my books do have sci-fi elements. It's really more stressful as writing novels and how to characterize them as genres. So they're very specific. Like I have a series that's about an alien race of vampires, so then that technically puts it in the sci-fi sector.
Okay.
It has to have, like you said, AI, something that makes alien or technology into it for it to be sci-fi, like futuristic, things of that nature. But then like my current stuff is more dystopian because it's futurism, but it doesn't really have technology that artificial intelligence or anything like that, and it doesn't deal with humans. So the human aspect of that is very important for sci-fi, because it's like us doing something, adding to it. You know, the magic of my later series doesn't really go into the sci-fi. It goes more into the fantasy.
I always tell, one of my panel mates is a geologist, big-brained science doctor down in South Florida. And we always battle because he loves Star Trek, and he loves the science of it. And I always joke and say, what's the biggest science in Star Trek? And I always say it's social science, because it's how we relate to everything. So taken from what you said, Brother Andre down there, yeah, you know, social science is how do we relate. So even if we're writing characters that are not human, we humanize them, whether it's a whale, whether it's a dragon, whether they have human feelings. We project that on there and almost go back to what Stephen Barnes said, you know, we're dealing with the what if. What if we came up with a way to provide intelligence to apes, right? How would they react to humans? And we know Planet of the Apes is one of my favorite science fiction films, so, or just stories in general. Dwayne, I'm going to ask you this question, right? This was something that was posted in reference to Black Lives Matter, right? Okay. Because I love to say Black Dreams Matter. And, you know, 2 years ago when Black Lives Matter started, you know, making themselves known for the Donald Trump post-apocalypse, right? People didn't understand what Black Lives Matter meant. They came up with Blue Lives Matter, you know, White Lives Matter. And we had to say, look, stupid, you know. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean other lives don't matter. Or y'all already, there's jails full of people that have done crimes to you all, but we don't even get to the courtroom. Okay, we getting gunned down in the street by the Judge Dreads. Okay, so that's when we talk about Black Dreams Matter. Do you take that as a way to say that other dreams don't matter? What does that mean, and how does that factor into sci-fi? I'm gonna complicate the question for you because I know you can answer it.
Hey, I appreciate you complicating that question. Let me say this: I was in D.C. speaking, and we were talking about Black Lives Matter, and someone said Blue Lives Matter. And someone asked an easy question. They said, let me ask you this question. If you were at a cancer convention, would you yell out, diabetes matters? And the person said, that's stupid. It makes no sense. And then they were saying, exactly. The same exact thing you just said, Blue Lives Matter, is stupid. It makes no sense because right now we're at a Black Lives Matter conversation. So your first point was, yeah, we know understanding all lives matter, but the Black Lives Matter is specific to what's happening to Black people. Now, in regards to the futurism of Black Lives Matter, the book I wrote is called The Stop, Improving Police and Community Relations. And I didn't write it for a futuristic standpoint, but now that I understand the whole futuristic thing, it's about empowering young people to make intelligent decisions today that will impact their lives 20 years from now. Because here in Chicago, 17% of all teens in Illinois are Black, 61% of teens arrested are Black, and 87% of all teens transferred to adult court are Black. So now how do we take this to the Afrofuturist? So now we have to empower our brothers with the knowledge and the history of their ancestors so that when they see this police officer, their first reaction right now is to run. But you don't run when you're powerful. You don't run and flee. You don't even have drugs on you and illegal activity when you're powerful. So what I'm trying to connect them to is, do you know who you are? Do you know who your ancestors are? They would never be sitting here pimping women, child trafficking, selling drugs, destroying their neighborhoods and their community to quote unquote make a buck. So as I look at the whole futurist movement and look at what I'm doing today, there's a direct tie-in, but it's all about the imagery of who are you? And a lot of our young people, they have no clue as to who they are.
So the what if question you answer is, what if you're pulled over by the police?
Absolutely.
And you play that scenario out. Of course, that's important. I came up with Black Dreams Matter. There's another one that I appreciate and applaud in the nerd community, the blerd community, and that's Black Heroes Matter.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I salute them as well. How I talk about Black Dreams Matter is in middle school, I portrayed a civil rights activist and had to give this long speech, and it was the most intelligent thing I did all through middle school. I portrayed Dr. King. And of course, they didn't give his speech to the sanitation workers in St. Louis. They had me give his Jewish approved speech that he gave at the Washington Mall, the Lincoln Mall, the I Have a Dream speech. And my politics go back and forth with various things, but one thing I appreciate with that speech is that dreaming is important. In college, I learned to develop a vision board to accomplish goals. And it's through dreams and imaginations that I write my books. It's through dreams and imagination that I come up with my desires, my fantasies, right? So it becomes utterly important for us to talk about our dreams to each other, our fantasies to each other in a public way, so that way they are universally accepted, universally known, and then what happens from there, we can act on them. We can see a black planet that we want to populate. We can go there. We can see a green pastures without a whole lot of chemical waste, right? And make those things happen. So there's a lot of futurism that's necessary for right now. And not going into preaching, because I know we're going to keep rolling with the lightheartedness of it all. But back to preaching for a second. Psychologists that I approve of, that shaped my adult intelligence, always talk about the subliminal message.
Go ahead.
Okay? All of those things are very important. And while we do have a non-monolithic and very diverse black community, we do have messages that translate. And when we talk about, I'll give you a very practical example. Killmonger in the comic books is not the Killmonger that you saw in February.
That's right.
Okay? The M'Baku, the gorilla tribe in Wakanda, on the outskirts of Wakanda, looks totally different than the one you saw in February. And if you've been lucky last September to participate, September before last, ooh, it's 2 years, in Netflix's portrayal of my favorite superhero, Mr. Luke Cage, you realize that he don't talk jive and he doesn't wear chain belt, bracelets, or a tiara. All of those things are the power of revisioned African thinking. Those characteristics of an ancestral plane being introduced into the Marvel Universe by way of Ryan Coogler are present throughout black sci-fi writers. If you want to see an ancestral plane, my book, The Thug Angel, I wrote back in 2010, has an ancestral plane. And if you read black sci-fi writers, you'll find that our presentation of death and the afterlife is very universal in what they saw in Black Panther. So when we talk about the fear of death, like when I saw, and I'm going to spoil a lot of things, so if you haven't seen Infinity Wars and your nerdism isn't up to date, okay? But when those characters at the end,
gonna kill the Black Panther?
I'm not going to say, we all know, and I'm not going to say specifics, okay? We should have put spoiler alert on there, but behind this cosplay African cloth is a real nerd. So I'm at the movies and I'm watching stuff on TV. But when those characters started to go wherever they went at the end of Infinity Wars, I didn't get fearful because I knew the ancestral plane existed at least for a couple of them.
There you go.
How about that? There's some spoils in there. Enjoy your Iron Man and Thor and Spider-Man if you want to, but Miles Morales is still around.
There it is.
How about that? Okay, so I just wanted to put this up there because it is important. The subliminal messages are important. Now, mind you, this panel is always open for question and answers, and that's one thing I didn't say. So if anything I say or any of the panelists say something that sparks a question, the mic is right here. This is not, a dictatorship panel. So if you got to jump in, panelists, they say, whoa, a minute, Jeff. Jump right in. Okay, so here's another one, and I'll read this. I'm enough of an artist to draw freely on my imagination, which I think is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. That's Albert Einstein, right? Found out he was racist, okay? Imagination will often carry us to worlds that never were, but without it, we'll go nowhere. Again, and this is, you know, white sci-fi writers who have enjoyed sci-fi as a title for years, since the 40s, 50s. If you go back to when Lord of the Rings and Flash Gordon and H.G. Lovecraft and H.G. Wells, right? H.P. Lovecraft, I messed their name up, right? H.G. Lovecraft and H.G. Wells. They go back years, but if we can go back to even the fables of Aesop, we embodied a lot of fantasy. And I'm not going to rock y'all if I say that even the Kemet civilization embodied a lot of fableism and fantasy and sci-fi to get points across. So that's important. Move on. Okay, now, I know I skipped. We talk about, and I don't need to talk about this, because we have one that's really coming up right now. Maybe y'all can make a quick comment, but there's a problem that we have even seeing ourselves in sci-fi. Okay, it's not our problem, it's the mainstream problem. Okay, they have characters in books, and maybe this community can't read, but the characters in the books are black. But they read them humanly, as Dr. King expected them to read it, but then when they see it on film portrayed as the way it was written, they have a problem with it. So they have this new movie coming out, Teen Titans. And one of the Titans is an alien. God forbid she's from the Donald Trump planet because she's orange, right? They portrayed the young lady as a black actress wearing orange color. And now they're flipping out. This just debuted last week during Comic-Con. Yeah. And so we had a campaign where about 4 years ago they said, don't read any white male writers in science fiction. And the mainstream sci-fi culture has been in an uproar because of the Hunger Games, Rue character, and various other, Johnny Storm, you know, before, oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name. Michael B. Jordan played Killmonger, he played Johnny Storm. So we had problems with that. Any comments any panelists would like to make on just seeing ourselves in science fiction, physically black people in space, anything?
I, for one, have been told plenty of times since I started publishing that I needed to write a story and put a white face on the front of it. It would be more marketable, I would be able to make all these sales, on and on. So that's not what I'm here for. I mean, it would be nice to wake up tomorrow and have millions in the bank from the book. I'm not going to say that, but my purpose of doing this is so that I can represent me, you know what I mean, and what I see. And I don't want it to come with one of my books get picked up for, you know, a movie or anything. My characters would be how they were portrayed. You know what I mean? I want us to be out there.
And I say amen to that. I actually changed the title of my books just to make them sound more urban. My book, Welcome to Boss Lady's Planet, the whole purpose of that was so I could see a black woman on the cover on the shelves of Barnes & Noble. Some of my favorite writers, even L.A. Banks, were told to, you know, I'm not going to say they were told, but their books didn't have anybody on their cover. N.K. Jemisin, she just won the Hugo Award, faceless covers. You know, David Anthony Durham, he won it 3 years ago. These are black people writing books about black people, and they have to have nobody on their cover. And what we know when we look at science fiction books is the main thing they have on the cover are people. You know, so why are our books, you know, faceless? Yes.
There's a new sister, Nigerian. I think she's 26 or 28 years old. I read her book. It's about this thick, Children of Blood and Bones.
Oh, yes.
And she has a black woman on the cover. Now, her hair is blonde. I don't know if that means anything or not. But, and the characters are black. She's in Africa. She's in Nigeria. And it's very clear. And she actually has a movie deal. And they're comparing this, that this might be like the next black Harry Potter, because she's not trying to light fire or anything of that nature. And she's going in, this is the imagination, these are the characters, this is what I created. So I'm thinking maybe if you're, because the book is excellent. I have not read a 526-page book in 48 years of my whole black life, okay? But I read this book in 2 weeks, and I shocked myself.
And it was engaging.
Oh my God, it's amazing. So the question is, are black people not getting the contracts because white people don't want to see the book, or is it because of the content of the writing? Her writing was so amazing that anybody, any color would say, yo, this is great. And I posted on Facebook, and unfortunately or unfortunately, majority of my Facebook friends are white because of this police book that happened here. Everything went viral on that, and they just thought, well, he's a good
Tell us your name again so you can get some Wakanda Facebook friends.
Sure, right.
The Facebook friends.
Dwayne Bryant, DWAYNE BRYANT. On Instagram it is I am Dwayne Bryant, but I think it's maxed out right now on regular Facebook. But I will gladly delete some of these people. It gets crazy sometimes.
Well, I definitely, I think that's important. You know, I am from New York area, so we have a, shout out to New York in the house.
She's not from Brooklyn, because she would have said Brooklyn.
Right. Brooklyn likes to dominate, but there are 4 other boroughs. I'm from the 6th borough of New Jersey.
Right.
I'm not even going to go there. I'm about to go say something. It's about to pull it out of me. I wrote a conspiracy theorist book, right, around Harlem. I was looking for an earthquake story, and I came up with one. I didn't want to call it Black Earthquake. So I found that there was a fault line ran right down 125th Street. So a lot of people didn't know that. Most of the buildings aren't earthquake coded, okay? They're not coded like they are in California and various other places that are built on fault lines. And at the time they discovered the fault line, that's when black people moved from Central Park to Harlem in the 1920s, 30s, when we had that Harlem Renaissance. So I don't necessarily dabble in conspiracy theories, but I do write about people who have those. I don't know why we're not on the covers of these books. I have 2 small publishing deals. I don't have a major publishing deal yet, but we can just speculate. And I do know that we are on the cover of the books that we self-publish. So to the authors, by majority, face, color, even full color, because I give her credit, full color is important. When you go see a black sci-fi book, there are people on the cover of these books. I'm not making a pitch to you all to read independent black books, but I will say you will find a more freer black story in our black self-published books. That's one attribute. You have a question. Approach the mic, my sister. Come on down. Let the church say Wakanda.
Wakanda. All right.
So I just wanted to kind of make a comment more so on this topic. So I work in marketing, and I sometimes do graphic design. And when I think about, like, when I was working at a company that won't be named, but it's a financial company. So working in that department, pretty much, it's really all white department. I come in and I notice that they don't use any pictures of people of color. And this is just prolific in this industry. It's really been starting to change. You see it more when you go to websites and you see more different like couples and racial couples, or you see more black couples or couples of different races. But at that time, I kind of had like a battle, and it was at first kind of put to me like, oh well, we want pictures, but they couldn't really say it because it's like an HR thing. You don't want to say, well, yeah, we feel like our audience is just like older white men, so they kind of want pictures that gear to that. And I was like, I'm going to pick whatever pictures I want to pick. Right. I'm like, this is where diversity comes in, because there are some places where I've worked and there's people who are like black women, they're black men, and they don't say anything. They're just like, yeah, it would be nice, but instead I was like, it's going to happen. So I would pick these pictures, and I would dare them to say something to me. And I'm like, you don't, like, do you have any data that that's the case? And maybe that's your audience just because these are the pictures you use. You know, these are the only people you're attracting, because sometimes when I see ads and if I don't see myself reflected in them, I'm like, well, I don't think they want my money. So I'm like, maybe if we put more pictures of different people in them, then you'll get more money. So basically I started this and there was a shift in the company as far as their reach, as far as the amount of leads that they started getting. And it makes a difference, because there's a lot of people who are afraid, because people tell them money equates to making things white. You hide black people and you'll make money. I think it's the opposite. If you put us on things, then you say to people, we want you to watch this. We want you to read this book. This is for you too. And it says to other people, you can read stories about us. It's not just hidden in our community. We're going to put it nationwide, you know, for everybody to see. You can pick up this book and you can be a part of this too. Just like I can be a part of some story that happened in England in the 1800s with some people that don't look anything like me. They can be a part of our stories and our narratives as well.
What's your name?
Isonaya Williams.
Can I say something? I appreciate your courage, and I think sometimes it just takes the courage to say this is reality.
Yeah.
I was at a global McDonald's conference, and the global director said that before they release a new product, a new commercial, they always test it in the urban market. And he said if it works in the urban market, it'll work globally. So black people are so freaking cool. We have no clue as to how cool we are. You go to China, you go to Japan, you see the guys with their hats, their pants sagging, because they're trying to emulate. Yeah, they're trying to emulate our culture. So it's only a white supremacist thought that anything black is negative, and that's being disproven every day, all day long. So I congratulate what you're doing. But black people have to have the courage. A lot of times we just are okay being in these big jobs. We want to make the money. We don't want to make waves. But a lot of times the people who make the innovations out of black people who say, yo, listen, this is what it needs to be. I want to see these images. And when you put those images out there, people enjoy those images because they're tired of the same old stale stuff.
I definitely, one of the things I always say, and this was in the Black Panther era, we almost have to date ourselves, because now we got $7 billion worth of proof that we sell. Okay? But I used to say I love Kung Fu movies, and I don't want to see a white person, an Indian person, maybe unless they're doing like a yoga like style, or a black person in there until they made the man with the iron fist. But I enjoyed the heck out of those movies, and they were all Asian. You know, so we're going to move on. Yep, Sunday morning. Well, see, I'm from New York, so we used to go down 42nd Street. You know, see, that's the old 42nd Street, the classic. Now it's the Japanese.
I had a comment on one of the points that she made about the photos. A lot of times when we're making our book covers, we use stock photos. And when I first started out, it was not enough stock photos of us. So I actually went out and hired models, which was way outside of my budget. But I was like, I don't want to, like, the stock photos of black people were just whack. Like, it was terrible. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to hire these muscle men or these women or whoever I got to do to make sure they were represented. And now, 8 years later, in my author community that I have, people are coming to me like, I'm so glad you hired these people, because now more of those photographers that shoot for book covers are targeting black models.
And same thing, it is so small, because you know, like Miami is home for a lot of models to come. I went on stock photo, I had found one artist that had a page of like a bunch of corporate pictures, and I took a picture, and the model was at the convention. He said, that's me on the cover. I was like, get out of here. So that's how small it is.
All right. Can I give a comment on that? By me being a comic book artist or creator, what I used to do, I would, obviously learn a lot about comics through reading Stan Lee's books with Black Panther, Luke Cage, and Doctor Strange, Thor. I just basically read their whole universe, and I didn't realize there were not enough images of us in these books, nor on the covers. But the more I learned, the more I realized it's time to actually get out there and do it ourselves. This goes back to, the 5 Heartbeats. Everyone's seen that movie when, the guy had 5 white faces on the cover. And I think it was Flat. One of them got really upset about it, but needless to say, he said, you never see, 4 black somebody's cover. But needless to say, it applies to everything that we do, just like in Marvel movies, for instance. Nick Fury, originally he was white. People had a problem with him being black.
Samuel Jackson put some swag on it.
Now all of a sudden I think they're making him black in the comics as well now. You know, there's a couple of characters that they've made black that the white people have been truly upset about it, but they feel that there's no room for us in science fiction anyway. When you look back at some of the science fiction shows, rather television show or movies, we aren't there. So they don't see a future in us. It's up to us to actually build that future for ourselves.
Absolutely.
All right. I just got the 10-minute warning, and it wasn't 10 minutes ago.
So 8 minutes now.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the panelists to keep their comments brief. I want to ask a couple more questions, and we have a question from the audience. So let me ask this question that I have, and then I'm going to go to you, because I want to move us to the next one. I came up with this little thing. Does anybody want to yell out what it says?
I love sci-fi.
I love sci-fi. I was at a thing with some brothers from Mega Sci-Fi, and I was selling them science fiction books, and I just came up with that. But what I like about sci-fi, I like the old sci-fi. We just got word that Jordan Peele from Get Out is now licensed to do Twilight Zone. All right. Shout out. All right. So hopefully it will be serious, not a comedy, but even if it is a comedy, we want it to reach deep into our fears. So that's an element of old sci-fi. Any of you all were into science fiction before Black Panther or before like the diversity? What are some of the things that you like? My wife loves the X-Files. So can you just tell us real quick something you like about old sci-fi?
I liked Alien. That was one of my favorite movies.
Okay.
I thought she was the best in the world.
Okay.
And I would make my mama watch it like 100 times. But we traded off because she was more, I'm losing the name of it, but she was, what's the one with the alien comes out.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that was her. So we would go back and forth. I'm like, well, we did yours, so we're going to watch mine.
And I like this because it's always important for us to express our love for the genre, not just because we write it and we see ourselves.
See, she like Alien, I like Predator because those were brothers. Black. I see Brad said, oh, back up. So Predator were black men that had left Kemet a long time ago in spaceships. They went to other planets. They knew that the white man was going to do what he was going to do here on Earth. So they came back with their stuff. And they came back like, yo, we're going to kill one, but we're going to do this different. So Predator.
I was more of a Mad Max.
Okay.
Yes. I was really into the ruggedness of the whole storyline in a nutshell.
And I'll just cap it off with loving all of those. I'm gonna go with Godzilla. All right? How about that? And I like Kong of Skull Island was my best movie from last year, so I can't wait. So now, I'll go to your question, and then we'll come to this one. One question will alternate, real quick.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask about Get Out because nothing succeeds like success. You know, you can't turn on a film critic and not hear about Get Out and Jordan Peele. But also, I was asked about the old, the OGs, people like Octavia Butler and Stephen Barnes, who was a protege of Larry Niven. People like that. You know, you got the old school, you got some of the new schools coming up. What do you think? Who's on the horizon?
Okay, who these new people on the horizon? You talked about Tomei, right, in her book. N.K. Jameson. I will say I'm on the rise. How about that? I think it's important for us to pick up, but I really respect the genre, so I'm going to say there's a whole wave of black sci-fi writers. You go on State of Black Sci-Fi on Facebook, Black Science Fiction Society. You will find us, blacksci-fi.com. We are there. So this kind of all of us on this independent movement. You said you had somebody? All right, let me go to this next one. What do you think about, okay, cool. What do you think about today's sci-fi? I think we kind of mentioned a little bit of that. Let me go to the next one. All right. Do black sci-fi creators have a certain responsibility? I think, Dwayne, you can probably hit this one first. As you see the little silly pictures I put up here.
Sure.
But we have to start telling our own stories.
Yeah, I think you just answered the question. Black people have a responsibility for ourselves to tell our stories, not just for us, but for our children, but not just for our children, Black Panther proved that white people want to see intelligent, powerful black images.
Right.
They don't, nobody respect the shucking, jiving, coon fella.
Right.
Nobody respect
And, all right, how cool would it be for Denzel to play Imhotep? All right, I just think that would be amazing, all right? Yes, and then I'm going to take the question.
As far as the responsibility for my latest book, I really wanted to tie in a lot of the themes from what we're doing today, like with the police, with Black Lives Matter, and it's I focus on the differences, how a certain race of this new world is treated, and one of the queen fairies, she's put in a place where these people are being mistreated, they're living in tunnels and they're not being treated correctly. Does she take her platform to help them and look outside herself? Because it's really sectored and there's a lot of like racial tension and stuff. So I wanted to put a look on that while still staying sci-fi.
Yeah, definitely exposing our philosophy on it. We've got 2 questions, so I'm going to cut that and we're going straight to the question.
Thank you. Just quickly, Sophia Stewart and The Matrix and Terminator.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me anything? Because everything's all over the place on the web.
Okay,
What's
first
going
of
on?
all, I think sometimes we can get overloaded with creativity. And I'm not going to try to explain her particular situation. All I know is I listened to a 3-hour interview, which is on YouTube. I don't know it off the top, but if you, this is the sister who wrote The Matrix, and she...
And Terminator.
And Terminator, or she wrote a story that inspired both of those. Yeah. All right, that's a better way to say it. But if you're interested, it's a long conversation, and I would love to write a story. And I think, again, like we said, we write stories that inspire a lot. Now, I don't know if it's plagiarism. You have to listen to it. So that's online.
It is plagiarism.
Next question.
I just wanted to touch back on the point you made about we have to do a pre-Black, post-Black Panther era, and say that there's also a lot pre-Black Panther.
Yes.
There would be no Marvel Cinematic Universe if it wasn't for Blade.
Right.
And as you go back through, yes, give it some applause. And as you go back through, you will see there are a lot of characters. Black Panther is the first black superhero, but the Falcon is the first African-American superhero. Right. And Lobo, which came out in 1965, was the first black character that had their own self-titled comic. And there's a lot of that going through. I'm wondering for the panelists, what do you draw inspiration from, considering that there's stuff over time that has those characters and they draw into beyond just X-Men?
All right, one of our panelists has already transformed. I'm going to say this because we're under 5 minutes, so that will be our last question. When you answer this question, please put your closing comments so that way we can just wrap it up. I will say I will be outside, Jessica will be outside, Andre has a table inside the marketplace, and Dwayne is just going to be hanging around, okay? But we have tables outside so you can catch our books. Please support the vendors. Now, Dwayne, take the question on.
Black Panther to me was everything. I mean, I saw it 7 times, took about 300 people to see it. Wow. Because it showed black people in our glory. It showed the black woman in her glory, the black family, even the crazy cousin that we all have. That's still a part of the family. He was still welcome, to at least see the sunrise at the end. So for me, I think that if we want to take this sci-fi to the next level, we just got to tell excellent stories. Excellent stories, be courageous. They didn't have anything crazy in Black Panther, with that crazy stuff that we normally see in mainstream media. So be bold and show black as powerful, and it'll work.
All right, Andre?
I feel that we should really concentrate a lot on creating images and storylines that are geared towards us but do not stereotype us. We already got other people that are stereotyping us. We don't need to do it ourselves. Like Dwayne said, make sure that your stories are tight. In my case, you have to make sure that the art is tight, and I guarantee you people really love what you're doing. You can catch me on urbanstylecomics.com. I got all my stuff on there. I'm all over the internet. Google Andre Batts. You can Facebook me. I'm right there. And if you want to talk to me personally, I'm right there.
All right. Jessica, what is your answer to the question?
I really drew inspiration from L.A. Banks. She was one of the first women of color that I found in the literature world.
That's how we bonded. That's how we
Yes.
bonded over LA.
And I work with one of the people who was alongside her now.
Ooh,
So it's
lucky
like,
you.
I don't want to name drop, but you know, it's nice to be welcomed into that embrace. But like I said, I want to write characters of color that are me and the stories that I love. You can find out more about me and my books on jessicacage.com. As you said, I'll be out there with my books. Also, I have a vendor table. I am here today representing Jen.
Not gin and juice.
Not gin and juice. He's a genie, and it's set in a post-magical apocalyptic Earth. Wow. So that's this book that I'm here to celebrate. If you Google Jessica Cage, you'll get a lot of Luke Cage references. So just
that's your real last name?
That I was born and raised Jessica Cage.
Cage is out there.
I mean, it's working out in my favor. I'm not gonna lie.
Jessica Jones.
Yes.
All right. I will answer it by saying a few of the slides that we didn't get to are very important to me. I think that we will be able to connect our imaginations globally. Not only did Black Panther succeed in the African American community and bring people that don't like superhero stories. I remember I was telling people, you gotta watch, Doctor Strange first, then you gotta watch Captain America: The Civil War. And I had so many people that didn't never watch any movie of black sci-fi until then. I have families and Christians tell me, it's sacrilegious, and I just think that is important for us to now tell these stories. I remember Outer Limits, their whole message was to scare people. The dystopian future is coming. The aliens are coming, and sci-fi was used to scare people. But it doesn't, in our manifestations, sci-fi isn't that. My aliens are black.
There you go.
Okay? And they come down here with flowers. Cures to all our diseases, all of those beautiful dreams. I say this, it's very hard to write a dystopian world and dystopian future when you feel like you already live in one. So thank you very much. Please meet us outside. Give our panelists an applause. Take pictures with Baba. Baba's going to be outside.
Thank you, Jeff Carroll.
Oh, thank you. Thank Baba.